Welcome. We are happy to have you all here today for Illinois SRF Public Water Supply Loan Program, post-application success. It should be an interesting session. What can you expect from today's webinar? You've successfully received funding commitment from the Illinois State Revolving Fund Public Water Supply Loan Program for lead service line replacement, or maybe some other water-related project. And so congratulations on that. If you're just interested in what the process is, you're in the right place as well. So you'll get all of that information. However, your work to secure your loan does not stop after getting your application approved. In this session, Cook County TAP welcomes Build Up Cook, the Build Up Cook team, to provide a comprehensive overview of the next steps to finalize loan procurement. I'm Ruth Kersey, project manager at Elevate, and I manage the Cook County TAP program, and my background is in public health with a focus on children's health and reducing lead exposure, and I'll be the facilitator today. I'm joined by Javier Briz, who will be the primary presenter today. He's a project water engineer and funding subject matter expert at Arcadis, and he's also collaborating with Cook County's Build Up Cook program with a focus on state revolving fund loan programs nationally. Mr. Briz is directly involved in the SRF application process from planning to closeout and has led the charge in advocating for and assisting several communities in South suburban Cook County to receive critical lead service line replacement funding through the BIL, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Also in the mix today is Drew Williams-Clark, the director of Build Up Cook in the Bureau of Asset Management at Cook County. Drew will provide more information on Build Up Cook shortly, and he has held leadership positions at the Metropolitan Planning Council, Center for Green Technology, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and the Village of Oak Park. So welcome to both of you today as part of this presentation. We're excited to have you here. So here's a quick overview of the agenda. We'll start things off with a quick overview of Cook County TAP and Build Up Cook, what we do and what's new. Then we'll move to the topic of the day, what to expect after your application is approved and slated for funding, including key deadlines and the process for securing a loan, and bidding and procurement strategies. And feel free to ask questions, as I said, at any time, but we'll primarily hold off on the Q&A until the end of the Javier's presentation. So with that, we'll get going. So just a reminder for those who are new here, Cook County TAP is a resource hub designed to accelerate healthier water in Cook County communities and is administered by Elevate, a nonprofit that wants everyone to have access to clean and affordable heat, cooling, power, and water in their homes and communities. And we do so in collaboration with Cook County Bureau of Economic Development with funding through the American Rescue Plan Act. It's free technical assistance aimed at helping municipalities develop lead service line replacement programs and implement water affordability best practices. We have recently added notification template letters in English and Spanish, as well as new resources from the Cook County Water Affordability Program, highlighting the importance of capital improvement planning and lead service line replacement. The combination of capital improvement planning with lead service line replacement and more. We are also looking forward to updating our SRF application scoring map. So many of you may have seen that on our website. This go round, it will include the new principal forgiveness allocation percentages, or score, for each of the census tracts. So that should be going up in the next week or so. So look for that. And you can go to cookcountytap.org to see all of our resources. And while you're there, go ahead and sign up for our newsletter so you can get notified when new stuff goes up. Here are a few quick reminders from Cook County TAP. First, the new state fiscal year has begun. If you didn't know that, that happened in July. So that starts the new rounds of SRF funding. And there is still some funding available for completing your service line inventory with final baseline inventory due April 15th, 2027. So there's grant funding for service line inventories that has been included in this year's budget. So I would take a look at that and reach out to the state for access to those funds. Lead Care Illinois is now done accepting enrollments. Lead Care Illinois is now accepting enrollment. This is a program that tests the water for Illinois schools and childcares for free and offers mitigation services if results are over 2.1 parts per billion. So you can go to leadcareillinois.org to find out more information about that program. Our next webinar will be on schools and childcare lead and water testing, and you'll learn more about Lead Care Illinois at that presentation. And it will provide a comprehensive overview of the new lead and copper rule and implementation in Illinois. And you can learn more about it and register on cookcountytap.org. And as many of you may have heard, Lead Care Cook County, the free lead service line replacement program for suburban childcares and schools is to receive free lead service line replacement has ended enrollment as of July 31st. And the program will end completely as of September 30th. And just a quick update on that program, we have received a record number of enrollments in this last go round leading up to the July 31st deadline. We've replaced 307 lead service lines for schools and childcares, and we're hoping to move that number to approximately 330 by the end of the program. So that's just a quick update on Cook County TAP. So I will mute myself in a minute here, but now I'll turn it over to Drew Williams Clark to talk about Build Up Cook and the work that they're doing. Drew?
Thanks, Drew. Happy to do it. My name is Drew Williams Clark. I'm the director of Build Up Cook. As Ruth said, I sit in the Bureau of Asset Management. Our day job is maintaining, operating, rehabbing, building, leasing all properties that are owned and operated by Cook County. But we've, over the years, received a lot of requests from struggling local governments with help on various capital improvement needs. And so we created Build Up Cook with an initial American Rescue Plan Act investment of about $30 million in 2023. And as Ruth just said, that funding is now coming to a sunset. So we will also be spending down the remainder of those dollars by the end of this year or late in the fall. We've really been privileged to be able to work with Javi and his team to try to learn a little bit more and help a group of interested municipalities pursue additional funding for lead service line replacement over the last 3 years. And we think we've had some great success doing that with the 10 communities that we were able to partner with on that particular effort. And you can kind of see some success stats there. You can always also see Javi's face at a table working through some of those issues when he had a little less hair a year ago or so. But essentially what we want to do today, while we can't provide more help than we are right now, we can help broadcast some of the lessons that we've learned over the last few years. And that's really the purpose of what we're partnering with Cook County TAP today to do. And so we're all part of the same coordinated Cook County effort to try to bring down prices and bring up safety and resilience in water systems, and especially with a focus on lead service line replacement. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to help broadcast some lessons learned to any community that might want to be able to pursue this in the future. So with that, I will, I can't advance. I think I'm handing it over to Javi now.
Yep, this is all me. Hi, everybody. Great to meet all of you. Happy to help in whatever way we can over the next hour. I'm looking at I was glancing over the attendee list, and I'm seeing a lot of my Buck community. So, hi guys, good to see you guys on there. I'm also seeing a mix of consultants, municipalities. So I want to make sure that this is kind of an overview of what the next steps are once you have the money reserved for you. I think I have it in a little bit of a future slide, but if you take nothing away from this conversation more than this one sentence, I think it will be a success, right? The SRF program feels daunting. It feels really confusing. It's a very big lake, but it's a very shallow lake. So the things that generally they're asking for you to do is check boxes. And as long as you're checking the boxes, then the money will be heading your way. It's not really a question of if, there's not really a question where the money gets taken away or it's not going to disappear into the ether. It's really just a question of check the boxes and reach out for whatever support you can do while you're trying to do it, right? So in the spirit of Big Lake, Shallow Lake, we have a little timeline here that is probably a bit wordier than I would always like it to look like, but it is a really good view as to what the next year looks like once you're ending up on the intended use plan, once the fiscal year starts on July 1st. You basically find out your project is included on the funding list. Ideally, at this point now, everything has been finalized, and you're able to see what is being allocated to your project, either principal forgiveness or 0% loan. And then from there, really, it's just kind of like a natural order of things, right? You want to finish your design, so you're going to want to present your plans and specs to IEPA. They have some checklist items, they have some requirements. Every bubble here is basically representing a checklist that you'll need to prepare and submit to IEPA, right? So you got your plans and specs. You have the loan application. I'll go a little bit more in depth into what that means for this program and for the funding that's involved with it, right? You're going to have to do a public bid for your project. Once you've done all that, you're going to present your bid documents and all of your other documents to IEPA, and then they'll write you a loan agreement. And once you have your loan agreement, you're off to the races. You can award your job, you can do construction, you can submit your disbursements. And in the case of lead service lines, at least the current funding that we have, once the project is closed out, that's when you get your grant status in the form of principal forgiveness. So again, this is just overall just kind of at a glance look at the timeline of what you're going to want to do and the submittals and the deliverables you're going to want to give to IEPA so that you can get access to your funding. You can go ahead to the next slide. All right. Oh, there you go. So all of my Build a Cook communities have heard me say this, opening sentence in some form or another. Um, but it really is. It's just a really wide lake and it's a really shallow lake. They love their buzz terms. They love their legislation naming conventions. So really, once you understand the lingo and you understand what they're actually asking for, or you know somebody that does know those things, then it really kind of becomes pretty bog standard, right? You have ultimately checklists and deliverables that IEPA is looking for in order to be able to write you a loan agreement, right? So what we call the design phase, which is pre-procurement, they're only really looking for three things, right? They're looking for a loan application, they're looking for your contract documents and specs, and really mostly they're looking more for your contract documents than for the means and methods. And then they're looking for your bid documents once you've opened bids. And really it's just for the lowest bidder, right? After procurement, they're going to want to look at your executed contracts. They want to look at, your disbursement requests because you're going to be asking for the money back. There's a bunch of compliance reporting you're going to want to do, right? Was the lead disposed of and not scrapped? Were you meeting LCRI compliance? Were you paying Davis-Bacon wages? All that kind of stuff gets collected and eventually reported to IEPA, and then your closeout, right? So there's only really about 7 deliverables, and I know I'm oversimplifying a bit in the complexity, but for each of these deliverables, there's basically a checklist provided by IEPA to meet their requirements. So as long as you can fill the checklist, you have a pretty good chance of being able to get through clearly, right? And if for some reason you miss, or for some reason you don't quite answer the checklist the way they want it, their project managers are usually open to working with communities and with engineers to help you get to the correct place. You can go next. So I always like to open up these presentations, especially for lead service lines, with validating any possible frustrations you could be feeling. When the IIJA, so the Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which most people are now referring to as bipartisan infrastructure law, when it was passed, they had a challenge ahead of them, right? They could either staff up a bunch of new employees and train them in how to administer grant funding and create all these rules and get the money out. But that would take a lot of time, and it would be it would be a learning process for basically everybody involved, right? So the other option that they usually have is they say, well, what agencies and what avenues do we have that already know how to administer funding? And really, the number one way that has been passing funding around nationally for decades are the State Revolving Fund programs, right? So all the IIJA, all the BIL led service line money, which is intended to be a grant, was passed into the SRF programs, which are inherently loan programs. So I want to really caution you when you're talking about your lead service line money or your lead service line programs, if you're referring to them as grant funds, they are spiritually grant funds, but they are loans. So there are things that you have to do to ensure that the money comes to you. And a lot of the frustration involved in trying to get access to those funds or in the fact that they're reimbursement programs is really part and parcel with the fact that these are loan programs, not grant programs, right? The grant nature comes in when they call in with what they call principal forgiveness, right? So once you've got your loan agreement and you do all your work and you do all your disbursements and the project is closed out, as long as you've met all the compliance requirements and as long as you've done everything you're supposed to do, IEPA will take the loan and they will clear the principal balance to zero. And then that way you don't make any payments, right? That is what they mean by principal forgiveness, and that's what we mean by this being a grant program. So one of the things that you'll have to keep in mind, both on the municipality and on the engineering basis, is that one, the funds are not going to be given to you up front. So you're still going to have to pay your contractors, you're still going to have to pay your engineers, and then the money will be reimbursed on the back end of that. And that's when you get your loan agreement. So any expenses that are done before that, the engineers, you're going to have to keep in mind that the villages and the cities can't pay you back until after they get their loan agreement. And it takes about IEP can turn it around in about a week to 2 weeks. They know that you want the money quickly, and so you can either work in a delay in your contract documents or you can work it out with your contractors. But you need to understand that that's a thing that's going to be a consideration always. It's always going to be reimbursements, and you still need to apply to the loan. As if it's a regular SRF loan, right? So you still have to submit financial reports. You have to keep up on your auditing, your loan agreements, and you're gonna have to make sure that your actual financial status, if you're getting principal forgiveness, is not going to be a deciding factor in getting the loan. But you do have to be on top of doing your homework to get those things submitted. You can go on. So my favorite thing to talk about: key deadlines for the SRF program. There is, outside of the fiscal year, starting on July 1st, there is really only one hard deadline that is immutable, which is the fiscal year ends on June 30th of every given calendar year. So the fiscal year starts on July 1st, which means at the end of the fiscal year is June 30th, and they're 6 months ahead of us. So we're going into the fiscal year 2028 next July. There's one other hard deadline here that's not relevant to this discussion, but that's the funding nomination forms and project planning deadline is March 31st, preceding this June. So this coming March 2027 is the deadline to submit your nomination forms for the next fiscal year for July. Other than that, you have a bunch of soft deadlines, and really it's just the nature of how time works, right? You have a bypass window, which is basically starting at the beginning of the next calendar year, where IEPA will start reviewing all of the projects on their list, and they'll confirm if those projects are actually going to go before June 30th or no, right? What are the chances that they're going to actually get these things awarded and going? Normally, by letter of the law, IEPA wants you to have submitted your loan application before the end of the calendar year. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that the money's going to go away if you haven't done that, but they'll start asking questions, and you need to really start, validating and looking at your designs and looking at your auditing and your projects to say, are we going to make it before June 30th, or are we going to have to bypass our loan because we're just not going to make it in time? This is not punitive. This is really just kind of reflective of the status of projects, right? IEPA does not want to leave money on the table because then they would have to go back to either the federal government or to back to their coffers, and that's like a thing that they're going to try to avoid at all costs. The other soft deadline that I want you to kind of keep in your mind is because of that June 30th deadline, it means that you need to have had a loan agreement written before or on June 30th. So IEPA takes about 30 days to review your bid documents. You have to advertise for about 45 days. That's the recommendation for lead service lines. So if you back up for advertisement and bid and review dates, that means April 1st is more or less your deadline for advertising a project. I do not recommend that you advertise exactly on April 1st because a lot of people are trying to beat the deadline. Contractors are going to be bonded out because there's going to be a lot of work getting bid at the same time. If for any reason there's questions or delays or you miss something on your bid and you delay your bid by a week, then you're going to miss this June 30th deadline and it gets really hairy. So definitely give yourself some wiggle room, but April 1st is the date you want to have in mind for like the latest possible advertisement date. You can go ahead, Ruth. So this is just kind of, again, reiterating what we're talking about in terms of deliverables, right? Our pre-procurement, it's really only three. the specs and contract, right? You're going to talk about Davis-Bacon language, the disadvantaged business enterprises, the checklists, Build America, Buy America. Your application has all the legal, financial, applicant, specific, project specific checklist and items that you want. For LSLR, you don't need permits, but if you were doing a regular SRF project, which is the same process, you would want to do your permits. That's going to be involved in this phase as well. Then you have your bids to IEPA, ideally accompanied by your recommendation of award. And once all of these boxes are checked, right, when all these four categories are met, IEPA writes your loan agreement. It's really kind of as simple as that. This is I think we're sharing the slide deck later, Ruth, but this is basically just a series of links that goes to the various checklists that they have. It always feels a bit glib to say Google it as a quick answer, but if you were to happen to Google IEPA, LSLR, SRF, it would link you to the IEPA's webpage, and they have everything organized. It's not the most user-friendly organization, but it does have all the things you'd be looking for in there. So if you need to, click in there, or again, you can look on any of the search engines, and it shows up pretty high up on the list when they need it.
And I can put these links in the chat in a minute here.
Perfect. Thank you, Ruth. You can go ahead. So now let's talk about our deliverables that IEPA is going to be looking for, right? This is not going to be a nitty gritty onto how to fill the checklist, but this is overall just kind of things to pay attention to while meeting these requirements, because you want to make sure that you have time. This is going to be one of the things that is the most time intensive items if you're not familiar with doing one of these. So the first thing I want to note, right, as I mentioned before, because this is a loan program, the loan application is mandatory. Even if your financial status is in a place where you don't normally get SRF loans, or you're on a kind of a list, or it's kind of back and forth, the loan application is something that needs to be approved and completed in order to get your loan agreement. The loan application has a few things that it asks for, right? It's if you imagine this as getting like a mortgage for a home, if you're a residential purchaser, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that kind of stuff. It's a sense of, who are you as a borrower? What's your status? The borrower, the applicant, needs to provide financial information for the preceding 3 years and projections for the next 5 years. IEPA provides templates for that that can be shared and kind of guided as you need them. There's a potential for the need for a lot of external coordination, right? I just now mentioned you have your front of house admin, city information people. There's going to be your city finance, village finance, giving information on your projections, on your current status, on your borrowing. There are legal requests and requirements, right? There needs to be a debt borrowing ordinance that allows the borrower to borrow money. They want your legal department to give a legal opinion to confirm that you have met all the requirements. Are you as a borrower under any kind of legal action? IEPA wants to know about all of that, right? Because they want to minimize any kind of risk in the money getting to your hands once you're ready to go. They look for current debt obligations. They look for financial projections. They look for tax exemption certificates. Again, if you're going for principal forgiveness only, this is not going to impact you getting that loan because IEPA is not going to get payments back, so they don't have to worry about are you going to be able to make your loan payments on the back side of it. The other thing that I would really caution you to do is to check your ordinances or to check with your legal departments and your municipal leadership. Everything that leads to new money has to be signed by what is called an authorized representative. And the authorized representative is not always the mayor, is not always the CFO. Those are defined in one of your ordinances somewhere as to who is allowed to sign for this documentation. So it's very often the mayor, it's very often the president of the board, but you want to verify and make sure that you know who your authorized representative is, or if your city administrator or city manager is also authorized to sign. I know that every now and again you can have people sign on behalf of another, but for these documents you want to make sure that you know who is authorized to sign what, because you'll have to provide that to IEPA. You can move on to the next. After the loan application, right, you have the next overall confusing cloud, which is design and procurement, right? So we say procurement demystified here. One thing for my folks that have Googled this stuff before or have gone to the webpage, IEPA provides a Word sample front end document that shows all of the contract stuff for awarding a project. There's usually some questions that come up as to whether or not you have to include that document in its entirety, or can you use your city specs or your city contract documents, your template documents. IEPA is not expecting that sample document to be included in your files one to one. What those front ends do have is all of the required language that IEPA is looking for. So you can take pages out, just make sure that what you're appending into your contract documents and your specs is everything that IEPA wants, and the checklist will help you verify that, right? Some of the IEPA required language, they're looking for verbatim. They want you to have that exact paragraph somewhere in your specifications. And the checklist will help you figure that out, and they have guidance that help you get to that point, right? If you're going to be revising your contract documents, your procurement documents, make sure that you involve your procurement team early so that they can correctly and accurately incorporate IEPA loan rules and language into your contract documents. I would be very careful about just appending paperwork into your contracts, because if for some reason your template front ends conflict with IEPAs in one way or another, a contractor can take advantage, or they can get confused, or IEPA might have an issue, right? You want to make sure that you're speaking consistently and accurately to what you do to procure your jobs while also meeting IEPA requirements. And IEPA is happy to provide guidance at a minimum outside of people like myself who would be able to do that kind of guidance as well. Bidding has to be made available to the public. There can be no restricted bidding. You cannot restrict the amount of bidders that are able to grab a bid, right? You can't just give the RFP to known and trusted individuals. Obviously, you can do you're going to ask for experience, and the bids are going to essentially show the proof in the pudding, right? But the jobs must be available to the public, and there are public advertisement requests into a weekly newspaper, right? Something like the Sun Times or the Southtown, to give maximum public participation ability. The IEPA generally does not allow local hire provisions. So you can't say 15% of the workforce has to come from this specific spot. That's again in the spirit of the SRF. They really want public participation. They want to maximize available access to all this different money. They have disadvantaged business enterprise requirements. If your municipality tends to use MBE, WB, VBE instead of the generalized DBE, IEPA is willing to work with you if you prove that your program either meets or exceeds DBE. We've done this in the form of letters, we've done this in the form of meetings, we've done this in the form of all kinds of executed documentation, but you need to make sure that whatever system you have in place is essentially functionally the same as their DBE. Davis-Bacon Act is obviously going to be your minimum wages. You need to make sure you know where to find your wage determinations on sam.gov, and make sure that there's going to be compliance as you go through your job to confirm that your contractors are in fact paying Davis-Bacon minimum wage, right? And then there is the infamous BABA. I think my next slide will talk about BABA, but one thing I want to point out, at least for this conversation, American Iron and Steel has been rolled into the BABA program. So it's all BABA. It's not BABA and AIS. But also there are new requirements and there are new things to pay attention to when it comes to sourcing your materials from America. You can go over to the next slide, Ruth. So I could fill an entire hour talking about BABA. So this, if you're hoping to get BABA specificity from me in this seminar, recommend it to Cook County TAP to do another one of these, and I can talk about BABA. The very, very basic version of this explanation is Build America, Buy America, right? Is a government attempt to bring a lot of business and manufacturing back to the United States. It applies to three major categories, which is iron and steel products, so American Iron and Steel, which we all know about, construction material, and manufactured products. When we say a manufactured product, we're talking about something like a valve. And so for lead service lines, this is not as critically important, but this is what it's talking about, right? So a valve, is composed of multiple components all assembled to create your overall project, your program, or like a pump, right? The sum, if over 50% of those materials have to come from the United States, basically. So even if it's like a manufactured product, you want to make sure that the things that are going into building it came from the United States. This notably does not apply to non-permanent things. So tools, equipment, supplies that you use to build the project. You rented a truck, you put up a temporary scaffolding, office chairs, desks. Those do not have to be sourced in America. This is talking more about like major construction equipment that's being used in the building of the thing. Again, in this case, service lines are service lines, so it's really just talking about the service line and any of your restoration material, any of your other materials that go into the project. One thing that I will point out, people really like to talk about waivers when it comes to BABA. Waivers are exceptionally difficult to get in the best of circumstances. The way the waiver process works is, as a municipality, you're not requesting the waiver for yourself. IEPA is requesting the waiver on your behalf. So what you're going to have to do is convince IEPA that it's worth for them to advocate on your behalf. And the only way that waivers really get granted are through a de minimis, right? So it's not a very large portion of the project, under 5%, or availability or overall cost. And that's for IEPA to confirm or to acknowledge, right? For lead service line related projects, I'm not going to say zero, right? But I'm going to say I'm relatively confident that there is basically no chance that a waiver will be granted for lead service line projects, right? Nationally, everybody is changing lead service line projects or lead service line materials, right? There are manufacturers nationally that have pivoted to starting to provide the copper and the plastic and everything needed for these jobs. So it's going to be very, very unlikely that you get a waiver. So before you even start costing your job, before you even start doing your project, be aware that BABA is a thing and that's going to affect your prices and where you're looking for your jobs and everything else. Again, for lead service lines, it doesn't really greatly impact the overall cost, right? Because at this point, all the contractors are aware of it and they're sourcing it that way. But BABA is definitely not going away, and waivers are very, very difficult. So as you do any other projects that are funded by SRF or funded by grant funding, just know that this should be your baseline. And if you get really lucky, you might be able to get a waiver because the specific pump you want doesn't exist. But that's rare and it's very unreliable in getting that confirmation. So basically, very long story short, BABA, make sure that your materials are sourced in the United States. Excuse me. So this slide here is really just talking about lessons learned and trade secrets. I have been working with SRF programs for just over 10 years. I have filled out hundreds of these applications. This is really going to focus specifically on lessons learned related to lead service line replacement, with how the IEPA is using the SRF to meet the spirit of BIL and IIJA. With the caveat here that IEPA will send an update for how fiscal years 2028, 2029, 2030, or 2030 will work as we start getting to the tail ends of the BIL IIJA funding. And then whatever new program will have new demographic requirements and new kinds of sets. So as of right now, August 6th, in fiscal year 2026, looking ahead towards fiscal year 2028, IEPA gave municipalities the option to pursue multiple loan numbers for your municipality if you have more than one census tract that can meet the requirement for this, right? IEPA is not requiring that you have a separate public bid for every loan that you've done. They are allowing municipalities to combine loan numbers into one bidding or to one project, one larger project. So, let's say you have two or three $2 million loans, you can do one $6 million bid and see, if that gets you better prices or more volume. I will caution you, this will be your first kind of headache option. IEPA still has to treat each of those loan numbers as a separate contract. So if you do a $10 million LSLR residential program and it's covering two loans for $5 million each, I'm just throwing numbers out, right? IEPA is requesting and is expecting for you to have two identical contracts for $5 million each and to hand both of those contracts to the contractor for them to sign and execute both of them. As far as the contractor is concerned, they're still working on their $110 million job and they're tracking their costs normally. But as the engineer, as the village, you need to make sure that you're tracking your costs across both of them and that you're treating each loan as its own individual contract. It's more of a paperwork headache than it is like an actual complicated logistical problem. For I'm going to keep hitting this table. I know all of my communities that work with me on this have heard me say it. Inventory is critically important for lead service line replacement work. LCRI is going to determine your replacement rate based on your inventory, right? Any unknown for replacement rate will be considered lead, and that will mean that you have a higher replacement rate. The amount of money that you have access to is directly tied to what your known inventory lines are in any of the methods that are approved, right? Potholing or plumber inspection or predictive modeling, that kind of stuff. Whatever comes after IIJA and BIL is going to be tied to inventory. This is just going to be a business best practice at this point. So if you've been a little bit behind the curve or you've been a little bit behind the finalizing of your inventory, I would really stress that you look into what you can do to improve your inventory metrics. So you can either minimize the amount of lead in your system or confirm the amount of lead in your system so you have access to funding when it's made available. This is going to be a thing that's going to be important basically until the end of the LCRI, LSLR periods, right? In relation to inventory, right, your project plan that you submitted in order to get access to this money that you have now has inventory numbers on them. It was obviously a snapshot of a point in time when you submitted with enough time to get your money allocation. Project plans are good for 5 years. One thing that we have found out or that we've learned from according with the IEPA, if you're going to update the inventory, let's say you had enough lines for 2 years or for a year, and you've now found more lines that you can place in the next year, when you update that inventory with your project plan, it's going to require a new PED, which is a preliminary environmental impact determination, right? It was the pre-project plan approval that you did your public hearing for, if you remember that. So that the bigger thing to remember with a PED is that requires a 10-day public notice for your meeting, and then a 10-day public comment period after your meeting. So those updates and that PED has to happen before March 31st of 2027. So keep in mind that if you're going to update your inventories, which are obviously due in April, if you needed to reflect on your project plan for funding access, that you're going to have to update the IEPA and do your updated PED well in advance of that April date. This is also the same if you're going to change your project locations, right? If you happen to do a phased project plan and it only cut out a portion of your municipality and you want to actually extend to more of the municipality, you're going to need to update your project plan. You don't have to submit a completely new one, but you will have to get an updated PED and have that PED updated. The final two bullets are really they feel really obvious, but it's something I really try to stress to everybody that I work with and to my internal teams. I'm a Murphy's Law adherent basically by training, and expect everything to take longer than you hope. So when you're talking about getting projections from your finance department, getting a legal opinion from your lawyers, getting debt ordinances and authorizations approved, getting your bids out, getting your bids approved, expect for something to go wrong and to lose 2 weeks to a month in the shuffle of trying to get things turned around and finished. It is always going to be you do not want to have a gigantic rush in trying to meet the hard deadline of June 30th by waiting around and kind of waiting to start your jobs and start your loan applications. Again, there have been people that work with me that have seen what that version of me which is very fast paced and very kind of, we need to get something turned around now because we really have to go. So expect for just everything to take longer. It's just going to be a lot simpler and it's going to save you a lot of headache on the back end. The other thing I really kind of want to point out, again, this is really just circling back to what I started this conversation on. All of the rough edges that are involved in dealing with this program is just the result of trying to tool grant funds through a loan program, right? The fact that they need multiple contracts, the fact that they're looking at very specific naming conventions, or the fact that the administrative code says things one way or another. IEPA is not doing that to make your life difficult. It would make their lives a lot easier if they didn't have to, align to those program rules. But the Illinois administrative rule, or the Illinois administrative code, the law of the land, dictates how IEPA is allowed to give money out to people. So, don't take it out on your poor PM. I definitely want to make sure that I'm validating the confusion and the frustration and how some of this stuff works out. But understand that they want to get the money in the hands of people that are borrowing, and this just happens to be the nature of how these programs get doled out, right? So assuming that it's a loan program and then meeting the requirements in the way that they're requiring them is going to be the most frictionless, the least problematic way to get access to your funds. So that's just one of those things that you want to make sure that you keep on the back of your mind, that IPA is not trying to be problematic with this kinds of stuff. I think I forgot to include a bullet here, but I also want to point out one thing to keep in mind. The IEPA that I'm talking about here, that gives out the SRF programs, the SRF fundings, they are not the same people as the compliance side of IEPA. So the Adam Nutt and the Lead and Copper team and the people that are getting on you about your sampling and getting on you about your inventory, they're a different part of IEPA. This is the funding IEPA that is largely accountants and project controllers, right? So they don't really have a strong manner on shifting your means and methods, or on shifting the nature of your inventories, or the specific scientific approach to how we do lead. They're the funding arm for the SRF programs. So whenever we talk about the IEPA, right, there's money IEPA and there's compliance EPA, and just keep it in your mind those are two different organizations or parts of the organization. Go ahead, Ruth.
And that is the end of your presentation, and perfect timing. So great job, Javier. Thank you so much for all of that information. And now we'll look to folks to see what kind of questions they have. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the questions. So again, if you can use your question Q&A that's down in your more area, that would be great. I don't see any questions right now, but also if you want to raise your hand and or take yourself off of mute, we encourage that as well. So I have a question for you, Javier. So in terms of lead service line inventory and having that put together, obviously it's very important for the municipality. How important is it for securing an application for lead service line replacement and or securing a loan? So how does that factor in?
Yeah. So, at the cost of sounding really overly dramatic, right? It is critically important in that this is really where my very last bullet I mentioned said, right, where IEPA compliance and IEPA funding are not the same arm. When you submit an application request to replace 200 lead service lines, let's just use a number as an example. IEPA funding will reach out to IEPA compliance and say, hey, how many known lines does municipality X, Y, or Z have? And compliance will just give them a number. They'll say they have 150 lines based on their April inventory that they submitted, or whatever their most recent inventory was. So if you have 150 known lines and you ask for money to replace 400 lines, they're not going to give you that money. They will give you the maximum is the number of known lines that they have, right? So they'll say you can have 150 because that's the number of lines that you did in your inventory. So keeping that number up to date is huge in that is really your cap as to what you're allowed to borrow from IEPA and where.
Awesome. And another question is, what are the biggest bottlenecks? So you've completed your application, you ended up on the IUP, intended use funding list, or IFL, depending on how you parse that. So you're on the intended funding list and you have to secure a loan. What's the biggest pinch point for most communities? Where do they struggle the most in terms of getting that loan application in?
Yeah, I think It's a little bit different for lead service lines, what I think is really interesting. But the biggest pinch point globally for SRF is doing the loan application document itself, right? Because you have to deal with your city finance department, you have to deal with your legal departments, your engineers have to give you information, you have to fill out information, the application has to be signed and notarized by your mayor, your authorized representative. And depending on your specific structure, I don't want to speak ill of financial departments or legal departments, especially as an engineer. But if you happen to have a finance department that's very slow to respond, or they're dealing with other issues, then it's going to take you longer to get the loan application across the board. I realize now one thing that I think was missing from the loan application slide, which I thought I had put it in, but I missed it. Audits are critically important for your loan application. IEPA is the oldest audit that they're going to accept is 2 years prior to the calendar year of this fiscal year, right? So if you have your 2024 audit in place and available, that's kind of the minimum IEPA will allow you to do while still borrowing money. They really want to see 2025, 2 years before the current fiscal year. So 2027, 2025. It's really difficult to get audits and to stay on top of the audit requirements. I think IEPA understands that and they respect that. But also everybody is struggling with this, and they really, really want to be able to. It's the only mechanism they have to prove that borrowers are going to do what they say they're going to do with these programs. So the loan application, I think, if I can only give one answer, is the biggest part because it involves the most things. But you want to make sure that your audits are up to date, that you have your projections, and then you have your ordinances all approved in time to be able to get your loan. Otherwise, design and bidding is always going to be a consideration.
So this is sort of a side question, really about
Hmm.
BUC and the engagement with communities. So I know that there's probably
Hmm.
a lot of people on here that are engaged with BUC directly, and they know what you do. And Drew gave a little overview of that as well. Hi, Drew. So this could be to you too, but as you're out there in the communities, we have a lot of small community water suppliers. Um, do you feel, obviously you saw a need for something like BUC to get in there with communities and help them work this. And I guess my overall question is, how prepared are community water systems to do these applications on their own? I know that's a big question, and obviously BUC is value added. So I'll just stop there. You get the gist of my question. Like,
Hmm.
have you been received with open arms to come into communities and help them do these applications? And why do you think, if so, why do you think that is? And if you look beyond just your cohort that you're working with, what's the value added for something like BUC coming in and working with folks?
Do you want me to feel free to chime in, Javi? I have thoughts. One, I would just
Yeah, I'll
say,
let you go first.
yeah, sure. 3 years ago, when we started down this road, there was a lot of federal money pouring into environmental finance centers and into various programs that could support local governments that were doing lead service line replacement. And so I think all of those partners, we happen to be one of them. I think we do a good job of it. I definitely give Javi and his crew a lot of credit for how we approach it. And I think we do great. Obviously, we're all going to cheerlead our own program. But I do think it was, in 2022, 23, when the LCRI was sort of in progress, but people kind of knew what was coming and they kind of knew where things were going. And there was already a lot of mandate to drive that forward. And as the state of Illinois had its own law that was mandating replacement as well, and some nuances there. There were a lot of resources that were sort of flooded towards communities that were available to them in a variety of ways. And I think that has been very successful in getting a lot of that money that flows through the SRF to communities that need it. And that is now sort of at varying stages of rolling out. I think as that federal investment in that technical assistance begins to subside, I think it's going to be harder. So that's one big answer to that question. So I think the value add is that anytime you can, I guess it's sort of part two to the response, anytime that a program or a support group, whether it's Cook County through Build Up Cook, or it's, one of the environmental finance centers, or it's any number of other, get the let out invested programs, anytime that you can reduce the burden that a local government that's already struggling to meet all of its other obligations to meet one additional obligation, that's going to be helpful. And I think it happened in a variety of ways. Are people prepared? I think I don't know, like, the best person to sort of, I would caution against talking about it in broad strokes, to be perfectly honest, because there's a lot of different folks in a lot of different states, and Build Up Cook specifically has targeted communities that really lack resources. And so, we wanted to be the support group for the communities that really are going to struggle with this kind of thing. So I think it's all been an add value. I think, again, the main thing is that it takes away from the need for a community that might already be struggling to do a variety of engineering related, operator related work associated with a potable system. If you can have someone that you can come in and help you from alpha to omega without you having to add that to your existing bill to whatever your support is on engineering, that's going to be an add value. I guess I'll just stop there. I think certainly, like, there are,
big question.
lessons to be learned and challenges to face, but I think in general, that's just the truth of it.
Yeah,
Right.
and I can take that alley-oop and kind of pass it over, right? Funnily enough, there's a phrase that has been in my mind now for, I think, coming up on 2 years, and I got it from Drew. That they were talking about, there've been all these studies that came out that essentially said that the vast majority of money that's out there for people to be able to do work like this almost entirely goes into the hands of the municipalities that have the staff or have the resources to chase it, right? And you definitely can see that here, right, in understanding the SRF program. At the cost of revealing trade secrets, I think most of the people on this call could do what I do if it was the only thing that they were doing. Because on top of having to, put out all your small fires and deal with your water leaks and deal with your revenues and deal with your meter systems failing and dealing with your operator you then now have to read 10 or 15 checklists and kind of understand it and submit. And most of the lessons I've learned, I'm a subject matter expert, basically, as I've walked into a brick wall enough times that I remembered where it was. And it's one of those things that it's really mostly familiarity and saying that, hey, when IEPA asks for this thing, this is what they mean. And when they ask for this is what they mean. And so if you have the time and the attention and the wherewithal to do it, you could, in theory, pursue the money successfully. There are people that do that without consultants all the time, right? But it is something to learn, right? Even just on the engineering standpoint, I think most of our municipal engineers here didn't go into this wanting to replace service lines to residential or commercial businesses, right? But because LCRI came out, they had to learn really quickly and really fast what are all the different pitfalls for doing this on a technical level, and then also start applying your loan applications and your contract and legal language to align with it. So it's a pretty big ask for any community to do it. And now all the communities are doing it all at once. And so, on a personal level, I have really enjoyed my partnership with, Arcadis' partnership with Build Up Cook and with the kind of work, because it allows me to have access to communities that really do need that help, right? I get to be that person that says, this is a big thing to know. This is a really big question to ask. But I know it, and I'm here to try to help as I can, right? So I would love to see more programs like that, more statewide and nationwide, to try to help these communities really get access to funding, because it's a big ask to chase it, to fill an application out, and to do it without all the stress of, will the money go away tomorrow because I forgot to check a box.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you for that. And we actually do have a couple of questions in the question Q&A. So I'll just ask them. For a municipality that needs many different water infrastructure upgrades across many different locations, but all part of one system, a failing main, a tank needed repairs, etc., would each project need its own nomination or
I think,
application?
yeah, I think Amanda posted a follow-up question too that I think is relevant to this.
Yep.
but then they're also replacing lead service lines.
Right.
Uh, so the very short answer is you would have to submit a separate lead service line project plan and a project plan for the regular SRF work. So I think if we simplify this a little bit more and talk about water main, let's say you have a water main loan you want to chase from regular SRF and you have lead service lines, you would need to submit a project plan for each of those two because they're different programs in the IEPA. But for the regular SRF side, you can submit a project plan that has multiple different projects. So in this municipality that you're theoretically talking about, you can say we are submitting a project plan that includes fixing a failing main, fixing a tank repair, doing necessary infrastructure work. We think the overall program will cost however many millions of dollars, and that's what we need to do. And then you would do a nomination for each individual contract that you plan to award. So if those projects are going to be separate projects, you can do one project plan, and then you can submit multiple nomination forms for each contract that you plan to award to a contractor. But all of that exists separate from lead service lines. So you would submit a nomination form just for the lead service line work, and then you can say that it will be coordinated with water main projects or projects that will be done in tandem. Hopefully that makes sense.
Awesome. So we're basically at time, and I'm going to share my screen one more time to let everybody know what's happening. But if there's more questions that people want to put in the chat, feel free. So just to recap a few things, we're going to send you out a follow-up email. If you're interested in receiving continuing education credits, you'll get that information added to that email. You can always see this video at youtube.com at Cook County Tap. That's our channel, and we post, so it takes a couple of days, but eventually this will be up there. So if you want to review anything, and you can always go to Cook County Tap's website to see more. And I think I have one more slide here. So this is everything Cook County Tap. You can also, Build Up Cook also has their own website that is not part of Cook County Tap's website, but if you type in Build Up Cook, it just pops up in your web browser, and you can see what's going on there as well. And that's a Cook County managed website. So thank you everyone for attending. I'll just take one more look here to see if there's any more questions in the Q&A. But it looks like we are good to go. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. Thanks to Javier, thanks to Drew, and everybody else associated with putting this together. And look, again, we might be putting on a part 2 of this SRF webinar series. So look for that to come out. We're in discussion right now, maybe something on BABA. So sign up for our newsletter, and we'll make sure you get that information. Thanks again, everyone. And thanks again to Javier and Drew.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, everybody.